The opposite can be true. Sometimes distance is not created because feelings are fading. Sometimes distance appears because feelings are growing stronger than the person knows how to handle. Think about that for a moment. Most people expect love to create certainty, yet for someone who has spent years protecting themselves emotionally, love can create uncertainty. Most people expect connection to feel comforting, yet for someone who has learned to survive by relying only on themselves, connection can feel frightening. When emotions stay shallow, everything feels manageable. There is little risk, little vulnerability, little chance of getting hurt. But when love begins to deepen, everything changes. Suddenly, this isn't just another conversation. This isn't just another relationship. This isn't just another person. Now there is something valuable to lose. And the moment someone realizes they could lose something precious, fear enters the picture. The avoidant heart often carries a hidden contradiction. It craves love, while simultaneously fearing the vulnerability that love requires. It desires closeness, while instinctively retreating from the exposure that closeness creates. This doesn't mean every distant person is secretly in love. It doesn't mean unhealthy behavior should be excused. But it does mean that emotional withdrawal is not always a simple reflection of how much someone cares. Sometimes it is a reflection of how deeply they care. Because real love has a way of exposing everything we have tried to hide. Love shines a light into forgotten corners of the soul. Love reveals insecurities we thought we had buried. Love uncovers fears we thought we had conquered. And for someone who has spent years building emotional walls, this experience can feel overwhelming. You see, avoidance is rarely about confidence. It is often about protection. The walls were not built because the person wanted to be distant. The walls were built because, at some point, distance felt safer than vulnerability. At some point, needing someone felt dangerous. At some point, trusting someone felt risky. At some point, opening their heart resulted in disappointment, pain, rejection, or loss. So they learned to survive by controlling emotional exposure. They learned to stay self-sufficient. They learned to depend on themselves. And that strategy may have protected them for years, until love arrived. Because love has a way of challenging every survival strategy we have ever created. The closer they feel to you, the more they begin to realize that control is slipping away. Not because you're taking it, but because genuine connection requires surrender. It requires trust. It requires openness. It requires allowing another person to matter. And allowing someone to matter means accepting the possibility that they could hurt you. That realization can create tremendous internal conflict. Part of them wants to move closer. Part of them wants to run. Part of them dreams about connection. Part of them fears it. Part of them sees a future. Part of them worries about losing themselves. This battle often happens silently. You don't see it. You only see the distance. You only see the delayed response. You only see the confusion. But beneath the surface, there may be an emotional storm taking place. A storm between desire and fear. A storm between love and self-protection. A storm between who they have always been and who they are being invited to become. And this is where many people make a critical mistake. They interpret every moment of distance as proof that they are not enough. They blame themselves. They question their worth. They wonder what they did wrong. But another person's emotional struggle is not always a reflection of your value. Sometimes it is a reflection of their journey. Sometimes the silence says more about their fears than it does about your worth. Never allow someone else's inability to fully show up to convince you that you are unlovable. Your value does not increase when someone chooses you. Your value does not decrease when someone struggles. Your worth existed before their attention, and it remains after their confusion. This understanding is incredibly important because it changes how you respond. When people fear losing connection, they often chase. They pursue harder. They demand answers. They try to force certainty. And while these reactions are understandable, they often create more pressure for someone who already feels emotionally overwhelmed. True strength is different. True strength is different. I can care deeply without abandoning myself. True strength says, I can love without losing my dignity. True strength says, I can give space without sacrificing my self-respect. That balance is powerful, because healthy love is not about convincing someone to choose you. Healthy love is about creating an environment where authenticity can exist. An environment where both people are free to grow. An environment where connection is invited, not forced. An environment where love is built on mutual willingness rather than emotional pressure. And here's something beautiful to remember. People can change. Walls can come down. Fear can be confronted. Emotional patterns can be healed. The very defenses that once seemed permanent can begin to soften when someone feels safe enough to explore a different way of living. Growth is possible. Transformation is possible. Love can become the catalyst for healing. But healing cannot be rushed. A flower does not bloom because someone pulls on the petals. Growth happens when conditions are right. Growth happens with patience. Growth happens with consistency. Growth happens when fear slowly loses its power. So if you find yourself loving someone who occasionally retreats, remember this. Pay attention to actions, not assumptions. Pay attention to patterns, not panic. Pay attention to reality, not fear. And above all, remember that your mission is not to rescue another person from themselves. Your mission is to remain grounded in your own value. Because the strongest position you can ever occupy is one where you are open-hearted but self-respecting. Compassionate but clear. Patient but powerful. Loving but not dependent. When you stand in that place, something remarkable happens. You stop trying to force love. You stop trying to earn love. You stop trying to chase certainty. And instead, you become someone who embodies the very qualities that healthy love requires. Confidence, peace, strength, presence. And whether that relationship ultimately flourishes or not, you win. Because you have not lost yourself in the process. You have become more of yourself. And that may be the greatest love story of all. One of the most misunderstood behaviors in relationships is emotional distance. When someone you care about suddenly becomes less available, takes longer to respond, or seems to need more space, the natural assumption is that their feelings have changed. Most people immediately interpret distance as rejection. They believe that if someone truly cared, they would move closer, communicate more, and make their affection obvious. Yet human emotions are often far more complex than they appear on the surface. For an avoidant person, emotional closeness can create an unexpected sense of overwhelm. The deeper their feelings become, the more vulnerable they feel. While many people experience love as comfort and security, an avoidant individual may experience intense connection as a challenge to the emotional defenses they have spent years building. These defenses were not created because they wanted to avoid love. They were often developed as a way of protecting themselves from disappointment, heartbreak, rejection, or emotional dependency. When a relationship starts becoming meaningful, something shifts inside them. Suddenly, they are no longer dealing with a casual connection. They are facing the possibility of genuine attachment. And attachment brings risk. It means another person now has the power to affect their emotions in ways they cannot fully control. For someone who values independence and emotional self-sufficiency, that realization can feel frightening. As a result, their instinct may be to step back, even when their heart wants to move forward. They may need time alone to process emotions that feel unfamiliar or overwhelming. They may become quieter, not because they care less, but because they are trying to understand feelings that seem larger than anything they expected. What appears to be emotional withdrawal can actually be a sign that the relationship matters more than they are comfortable admitting. This creates a confusing dynamic for their partner. One person sees distance and assumes interest is fading. The other feels stronger emotions than ever, but does not know how to express them safely. The result is often misunderstanding, frustration, and unnecessary anxiety. The key is recognizing that emotional overload and emotional disinterest are not always the same thing. A person who is truly uninterested usually becomes consistently detached and invests very energy in maintaining the connection. An avoidant person who is overwhelmed by deepening feelings often continues to show signs of care, concern, and attachment, even while seeking temporary space. Understanding this distinction can completely change how you view someone's behavior. Sometimes the silence is not the absence of feeling. Sometimes it is the evidence of feelings that have become so significant that the person is struggling to manage them. In those moments, distance may not be a sign that love is disappearing. It may be a sign that love is becoming more real than they ever expected. When an avoidant person begins to fall deeply in love, they are not only developing feelings for someone else, they are being forced to confront parts of themselves they have spent years avoiding. This is one of the most difficult and confusing aspects of love for someone with an avoidant. Attachment style. The relationship itself may not be the source of their discomfort. Instead, the relationship acts like a mirror, reflecting fears, insecurities, and unresolved emotional wounds that have remained hidden beneath the surface. Many avoidant individuals become experts at maintaining control over their emotions. They focus on independence, self-reliance, and keeping life manageable. As long as relationships remain casual or emotionally distant, they can operate within their comfort zone. They can enjoy companionship without feeling exposed. But when a connection becomes meaningful, the emotional stakes change. Suddenly, they are no longer protecting a casual interest. They are protecting their heart. This shift often awakens fears they did not realize were still present. They may begin questioning whether they are capable of sustaining a healthy relationship. They may worry about being hurt, abandoned, disappointed, or emotionally overwhelmed. Even if they genuinely care about someone, these fears can become louder as the relationship deepens. The closer they feel, the more vulnerable they become, and vulnerability is often unfamiliar territory for them. Love has a unique ability to expose emotional blind spots. It can reveal insecurities about worthiness, trust, commitment, and intimacy. An avoidant person may suddenly find themselves experiencing emotions they cannot easily explain. They may feel anxious about needing someone. They may struggle with the realization that another person's actions can affect their happiness. For someone who has built their identity around independence, this emotional dependence can feel unsettling. As these feelings emerge, they often trigger internal conflict. One part of them wants to embrace the connection and move closer. Another part wants to retreat to the safety of familiar emotional patterns. They may question the relationship, overanalyze their feelings, or convince themselves they need more space. From the outside, this behavior can appear inconsistent or confusing. From the inside, however, it often feels like a battle between desire and self-protection. What makes this experience particularly challenging is that many avoidant individuals are not fully aware of what is happening. They may recognize that they feel overwhelmed, but they cannot immediately identify the deeper emotional wounds being activated. As a result, they withdraw, not because the connection lacks value, but because it has become valuable enough to challenge old beliefs and defenses. In this way, deep love becomes more than a romantic experience. It becomes an invitation to growth. It asks them to confront fears they have long avoided, question protective habits that no longer serve them, and consider a new way of relating to another person. That process is rarely comfortable, but it often begins when feelings become too significant to ignore. One of the most painful experiences in a relationship is trying to understand someone's past. Silence. When messages become less frequent, conversations lose their usual warmth, or a person seems emotionally unavailable, it is easy to assume the worst. Most people naturally interpret silence as a sign of disinterest, detachment, or fading feelings. However, in the case of an avoidant person, silence can sometimes represent something entirely different. What looks like indifference from the outside may actually be an intense internal struggle taking place behind the scenes. Avoidant individuals often have difficulty processing strong emotions in real time. When feelings become overwhelming, their first instinct is not always to talk about them. Instead, they tend to retreat inward. They need time and space to make sense of what they are experiencing. While other people might seek comfort through connection and communication, avoidant individuals often seek comfort through solitude and emotional distance. This creates a confusing contradiction. The very moment when they feel the strongest emotions may also be the moment when they communicate the least. Their silence is not necessarily a statement about how much they care. In many cases, it is a reflection of how much emotional activity is happening inside them. They may be analyzing their feelings, questioning their readiness for intimacy, or trying to understand why the relationship is affecting them so deeply. For someone on the receiving end, this silence can feel personal. It is easy to think, if they cared, they would reach out. While consistent communication is certainly important in healthy relationships, emotional behavior is not always that straightforward. An avoidant person's silence often has more to do with their relationship with vulnerability than with their feelings toward another person. Inside their mind, there may be a constant battle taking place. They may genuinely want closeness while simultaneously fearing it. They may think about the person often while struggling to express those thoughts. They may feel a growing attachment while also feeling trapped by the responsibility and emotional exposure that attachment creates. These conflicting emotions can leave them feeling stuck, unsure whether to move closer or create more distance. The result is often hesitation. Instead of taking action, they withdraw. Instead of expressing emotions, they process them privately. Instead of seeking reassurance, they attempt to regain a sense of emotional control on their own. Unfortunately, this behavior frequently sends the wrong message to the people they care about most. This internal battle can be exhausting. The avoidant person may feel guilty for pulling away, while also feeling unable to do anything differently in that moment. They may miss the connection, think about reaching out, and even fear losing the relationship, yet still struggle to bridge the gap between what they feel and what they communicate. Understanding this dynamic does not mean excusing unhealthy behavior or accepting endless emotional unavailability. It simply means recognizing that silence is not always empty. Sometimes behind the quiet exterior is a person wrestling with fears, vulnerabilities, and emotions they have never fully learned how to express. In those moments, their lack of communication may not be proof that they do not care. It may be evidence of an internal conflict they have not yet learned how to navigate. The deeper an avoidant person falls in love, the more they may begin to experience a sense of emotional vulnerability that feels unfamiliar and uncomfortable. What many people perceive as a natural part of intimacy can feel like a loss of control to someone who has spent years relying on emotional self-sufficiency. As a result, the closer they feel to another person, the more intense their internal fears can become. For many avoidant individuals, independence is not simply a preference, it is a form of security. They have learned to trust themselves, manage their own emotions, and avoid situations where they might become too dependent on others. This way of living creates a sense of predictability and control. They know what to expect when they rely on themselves. They know how to protect their emotions when they keep a certain amount of distance. Love changes that equation. When someone becomes important to them, they can no longer maintain the same level of emotional detachment. Suddenly, another person's words matter. Their presence matters. Their absence matters. The relationship begins to influence their emotional world in ways they cannot fully control. This realization can be deeply unsettling because it challenges the very foundation of how they have learned to feel safe. The paradox is that they often want the closeness they are afraid of. They enjoy the connection, appreciate the companionship, and value the person deeply. Yet at the same time, they may feel anxious about how much that person means to them. The stronger the attachment becomes, the greater the perceived risk. If they care deeply, they can be hurt deeply. If they become emotionally dependent, they may lose the sense of autonomy they have worked hard to maintain. This fear is not always conscious. They may not sit down and think, "I'm afraid of losing control." Instead, the fear often shows up through behaviors. They may need more space after moments of intense intimacy. They may become distant after a particularly meaningful conversation. They may suddenly focus on work, hobbies, or other responsibilities. These actions are often attempts to restore a sense of balance and independence when emotions begin to feel overwhelming. Another challenge is that intimacy requires surrendering certainty. No matter how careful a person is, love involves trust. It involves allowing someone else to see your weaknesses, needs, and emotions. For an avoidant individual, this level of openness can feel risky because it removes some of the emotional armor they have relied upon for years. As the relationship progresses, they may find themselves caught between two powerful desires. One desire pulls them toward connection, closeness, and emotional intimacy. The other pulls them towards safety, independence, and self-protection. This internal tug-of-war can create confusion not only for their partner, but also for future. What makes this experience so difficult is that the fear does not necessarily mean they want less love. In many cases, it means the love has become significant enough to challenge their old patterns. The relationship is no longer something they can keep at a comfortable distance. It is affecting them on a deeper level, forcing them to confront the reality that true intimacy requires trust, vulnerability, and the willingness to let another person matter. For someone who has spent years guarding their emotional world, that can feel both beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The emotional walls that avoidant individuals build are rarely created without reason. Most of these defenses develop over time as a response to experiences that taught them vulnerability could lead to pain. Whether those experiences came from childhood relationships, family dynamics, past heartbreaks, or repeated disappointments, the lesson often becomes the same. Protect yourself before someone else has the chance to hurt you. Over the years, these protective habits become so familiar that they begin to feel like a normal part of life. These walls are not always obvious. They do not necessarily appear as coldness or a lack of emotion. Sometimes they show up as extreme independence, reluctance to ask for help, difficulty expressing feelings, or discomfort when relationships become too serious. To the outside world, an avoidant person may seem strong, self-sufficient, and completely in control. Yet beneath that surface is often someone who has learned to equate emotional distance with safety. The challenge begins when real love enters the picture. Unlike casual attraction or surface-level relationships, genuine love demands something different. It asks people to be seen. It asks them to trust. It asks them to reveal parts of themselves they normally keep hidden. For someone who has spent years relying on emotional defenses, this can feel deeply uncomfortable. As feelings grow stronger, the walls that once seemed useful begin to create problems. The same barriers that protected them from pain now prevent them from experiencing the depth of the connection they secretly desire. They may want closeness, yet their instincts encourage distance. They may long for understanding, yet struggle to communicate openly. They may crave intimacy, yet become anxious when it actually appears. This creates an internal conflict that can be difficult to understand. On one side is the desire for love, companionship, and emotional connection. On the other side are old survival mechanisms designed to keep them safe. These two forces often pull in opposite directions, leaving the avoidant person feeling confused and conflicted. Love has a unique way of exposing this conflict. The more meaningful the relationship becomes, the harder it is to maintain emotional barriers without consequences. They begin to notice that keeping someone at a distance also keeps them from experiencing the comfort, support, and security that healthy relationships can provide. The walls may still offer protection, but they also create loneliness. At this stage, many avoidant individuals face a choice, whether consciously or unconsciously. They can continue relying on familiar defenses, or they can begin exploring a new way of relating to others. This process is rarely quick or easy. Lowering emotional walls requires courage, because it involves stepping into uncertainty. It means accepting that vulnerability carries risk. It means recognizing that no relationship comes with absolute guarantees. What makes this journey significant is that the walls themselves are often no longer serving the purpose they once did. They were built to protect against hurt, but they may now be preventing growth, connection, and emotional fulfillment. The relationship becomes a mirror, showing them that the strategies that once helped them survive are now limiting their ability to thrive. In this way, real love becomes more than a romantic experience. It becomes a challenge to outdated beliefs and protective patterns. It gently asks whether safety alone is enough, or whether a meaningful life also requires openness, trust, and the willingness to let someone truly enter the heart. For an avoidant person, that question can be one of the most transformative they will ever face. One of the greatest mistakes people make when dealing with an avoidant partner is believing that more pressure will create more connection. When someone begins pulling away, the natural reaction is often to chase harder. People send more messages, demand more answers, seek constant reassurance, and try to force clarity from a situation that feels uncertain. While these reactions are understandable, they frequently produce the opposite of the desired result. The more pressure an avoidant person feels, the more likely they are to retreat further into their emotional defenses. This is why patience and self-respect are so important. Patience does not mean accepting poor treatment or endlessly waiting for someone to change. It means understanding that emotional growth often happens gradually. People rarely overcome years of protective habits overnight. Trust, vulnerability, and emotional openness develop over time, especially for someone who has spent much of their life avoiding those experiences. At the same time, patience must be balanced with self-respect. Many people confuse love with sacrifice and begin abandoning their own needs in an attempt to hold on to a relationship. They tolerate behavior that hurts them, neglect their own emotional well-being, and place all of their focus on fixing the other person. Unfortunately, this approach often creates an unhealthy dynamic where one person is constantly giving while the other remains emotionally unavailable. Self-respect changes the energy completely. It allows you to care deeply about someone without losing sight of your own worth. It means recognizing that your value does not depend on another person's, your ability to fully show up. You can offer understanding, compassion, and support while still maintaining healthy boundaries. You can give someone space without chasing them. You can remain open-hearted without becoming emotionally dependent on their response. Ironically, this balanced approach often creates the safest environment for genuine connection to develop. Avoidant individuals are highly sensitive to feelings of pressure, obligation, or emotional control. When they sense that someone is trying to force intimacy, they may instinctively withdraw. But when they feel respected, accepted, and free to move at a healthy pace, they are often more willing to lower their defenses. This does not happen because space magically fixes everything. It happens because space reduces fear. It allows them to process emotions without feeling trapped. It gives them an opportunity to move toward connection voluntarily rather than out of guilt or pressure. Genuine intimacy cannot be forced. It must be chosen. At the same time, maintaining self-respect protects you from becoming consumed by uncertainty. Instead of constantly monitoring their behavior, you stay focused on your own life, goals, happiness, and emotional health. You stop measuring your worth by how quickly they respond or how much attention they give you. You understand that a healthy relationship should add to your life, not become the sole source of your identity. When patience and self-respect work together, they create a powerful foundation. You become someone who is loving but not desperate, understanding but not self-sacrificing, available but not chasing. This energy communicates confidence and emotional maturity. It says, I care about you, but I also care about myself. And that is often the most attractive and healing message an avoidant person can experience. It removes pressure, encourages authenticity, and creates room for real emotional growth. Whether the relationship ultimately succeeds or not, maintaining patience and self-respect ensures that you remain grounded in your own value, which is essential for any healthy and lasting connection. As we come to the end of this message, remember this. An avoidant person's distance is not always a reflection of a lack of love. Sometimes it is the result of fears, insecurities, and emotional defenses being challenged by feelings that have become deeper than they expected. But no matter what someone else is going through, never lose sight of your own value. Love is not about chasing, convincing, or proving your worth. It is about showing up with confidence, patience, self-respect, and an open heart.